time, whenever we talk about a character, I want to give them a difficulty ranking, as the difference in difficulty between characters is a lot more important in Hopeless Pursuit than in NDC Deluxe. But before we can talk about characters, there are a few universal changes that we have to go over. The moment that you spawn in, you might notice, I only have 60% power. Thankfully, we don't just have 60%, that just wouldn't be possible. In fact, the Green Run world record for normal NDC Deluxe is 38%, held by Pyrus and Almohadales. So with how much we're closing the doors in HP, there is no way we'd be able to survive that. Thankfully, Rockstar Foxy has been reworked to give us more power. In Vanilla UCN and UCN Deluxe, Rockstar Foxy would rarely spawn, and if you got lucky and he didn't jump scare you immediately when you clicked MeBird,
5 coins. Please deposit 5 coins. Please deposit 5.
Yeah,
Thank you
you
for
win some,
depositing
give me
5 coins.
Yar, you play with fire, and sometimes you get burned.
he'd give you 4 different options you could choose from that would help you. Now in HP, Rockstar Foxy's parrot is guaranteed to spawn every 30 seconds, and he'll never jump scare you when you click it. Instead, he'll now present you with 4 new options. The top one will give you 5% more power, and the rest will immediately sabotage you by either warming up the office, making a ton of noise, or stealing 10 of your Faz coins. So we can't even have power normally. Hopeless Pursuit makes you fight for literally everything. And if we miss even one MeBird from Rockstar Foxy, or hit one of the other options, it is very likely that we won't have enough power to finish the night. The other universal change has to do with Faz coins. Because so many characters that influence Faz coins have been buffed in Hopeless Pursuit, Faz coins overall are much harder. In regular Deluxe, plushies would cost 40 coins each, and you could carry a max of 100. Now in Hopeless Pursuit, plushie animatronics have been mega buffed to cost 60 whole Faz coins, and you can only carry a max of 70 coins total. The ventilation also goes out significantly faster in HP, and in order to maintain good visibility, you'll have to reset it twice per camera cycle. But there are a lot more changes on the character side of things. When we talk about each character in a group, I'll give them a tiered difficulty ranking from 1 to 5. We'll go deeper into the tier 1 characters specifically after we're done with all of the changes, as they are all like insane. But just know for now that literally everyone in HP is difficult to some extent. There is not a single useless character. To start off, let's talk about our largest set of characters in the camera characters. We use the exact same camera cycle in Hopeless Pursuit that we did in NDC, so I'll go in the order that we see them in the camera cycle, starting off with Bonnie and Foxy. If you end up looking at Bonnie on the cameras, he will now permanently disable the cameras for the entire night. Foxy is also much more lethal, as now he doesn't even have stages anymore. Usually, Foxy would progress through 4 stages before he makes his way into your office and ends your game, but here, if he progresses even a single stage, he just instantly jump scares you.
That was Bonnie. I'm sure of it.
The puppet has been changed so that the music box now drains much faster and winds a bit slower, so now you'll have to dedicate a lot more time to winding the box per cycle. The hardest character in base NDC, Chica, has also been buffed and reworked. In HP, she's more likely to get angry, but to compensate, she gives a lot more time to switch the music. You can also now only hear her when you're selected on camera 4, whereas in NDC, you could hear her throughout the entire building. Moving on to the duck system, we see a rare instance of a nerf from NDC to HP. Now, don't worry, there's only like 3 of these throughout the entire change, and this is 2 of the 3. Orville and Nedbear were previously the only difficult parts of the ducks in NDC. However, they now move extremely slow in Hopeless Pursuit. In fact, during the duck cycle, you can simply change the side of the lure, then open the previously closed duct, and you will always survive. The challenge here isn't thinking about which animatronics are headed where and planning accordingly. It's more so an aim-based challenge of trying to change the ducks around fast enough to keep up with the breakneck speed of everything else. Which is why, despite Orville and Nedbear being bumped from tier 1s to tier 5s, Hippo, Pigpatch, and Happy Frog are all solid tier 2s, as the buttons to change the ducks and especially changing the lure around requires a good bit of accuracy. And you'll notice that when we get into the strategy segment, that the overall philosophy behind Hopeless Pursuit is sacrificing brain power and planning for raw skill, aim, and keyboard torture. We see this again as we move into the vents. Both Mangle and Withered Chica have been significantly buffed in their speed, and the quote-unquote deluxe has no RNG situation can now no longer happen. happen. Also, as a small quality of life change, the moment Mangle and Chica overlap with Event Snare, they'll instantly bonk, whereas in NDC, they actually have to overlap with it for half a second. This might not seem like a big deal, but half a second in HP is a massive difference. Now, moving into the camera system, you might remember that the entire basis for the cam cycle was Rockstar Bonnie's guitar locations. And oh boy, did Rockstar Bonnie get quite the buff in HP. You see, Rockstar Bonnie is the first of our perma characters. That's right, in Hopeless Pursuit, some characters will now just stay in your office for the entire night once they show up for the first time. Where normally you could take care of them and they would leave by playing their mechanic, now that mechanic just resets their kill timer and prolongs the inevitable. Rockstar Bonnie is also a bit faster to kill, but his perma buff is definitely more significant. Toy Freddy has also been noticeably buffed, and his kill timer is way shorter. I couldn't see f***ing anything, bro. I can't tell you how many times I've been literal frames away from closing the door on Mr. Hugs just for Toy Freddy to game over right in my face. Toy Freddy serves as a perfect reminder that in HP, you are always on the brink of death constantly. And if you aren't fast enough, someone's gonna check you for it. Now, on the last camera, we have Funtime Foxy and Plushtrap. Plushtrap got the same treatment as Rockstar Bonnie and is now permanent. And Funtime Foxy now has a showtime every single hour. Before we move on to the other groups of characters, there are two camera characters that have been heavily buffed from NDC. Right as you open the cameras, Phantom Mangle will always appear, giving you 1 second to hit the camera button and despawn her. Thankfully, the camera button is pretty large, so she's not that terrible. However, her partner, Phantom BB, has gone from completely free to a high tier 1. Phantom BB can randomly appear on the cameras as you're moving through them, and only gives you 1 second to react and click the same camera, or switch cameras to make him disappear. Not only is his kill timer insanely fast, but if you fail to get rid of him, he just straight up kills you, with a completely custom jumpscare animation unique to Hope. Completely free to a high tier 1. Phantom BB can randomly has gone from completely free to a high tier 1. Phantom BB can randomly appear on the cameras as you're moving through them, and only gives you 1 second to react and click the same camera, or switch cameras to make him disappear. Not only is his kill timer insanely fast, but if you fail to get rid of him, he just straight up kills you, with a completely custom jumpscare animation unique to Hopeless Pursuit. He combos very well with Rockstar Bonnie and Bone Guy, as your brain wants you to click on the items that you have to get, so you don't realize that Phantom BB is there until it's too late. As you're moving through the cameras, you'll be constantly harassed by our next group of animatronics, the door characters. I would say that this entire group in NDC was the easiest of the 5 categories, as they generally didn't spawn much. However, in HP, my god. That was an impossible keyboard combo. That was a straight up impossible keyboard combo. You can't tell me a single sequence of inputs that you could do to win that. There's literally no way. Alright, let's get some of the obvious ones out of the way. Nightmare and Nightmare Fredbear are absolutely insane in Hopeless Pursuit. Nightmare went from appearing at the door roughly every 25 to 30 seconds to now appearing every 3 to 5 seconds. I'm sorry, did I say every 3 to 5 seconds? My bad. I must have been misinformed. He can appear every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds he can appear. Fredbear is the same, but appears slightly less. These two alone make up so much keyboard clutter and make it extremely difficult to remember if you have a door closed or not. Ballora and Afton also appear a lot more frequently, but nowhere near as much as Nightmare and Fredbear. Our event characters, Ennard, Springtrap, and Knowlton Freddy, also appear more frequently, but generally aren't that threatening. Now, the last 3 door characters have been reworked a bit. One in an honestly great change, and the others in the most infuriating way possible. Freddy actually got a pretty good change. In base NDC, Freddy would arrive at the door roughly every 50 seconds unless you were burning the building down. Once he was there, you'd have to close the door for 1 full second until he left. Though 1 second might not seem like a lot, it definitely feels like it, as every other door character except for Afton, because he's a little weird, will always leave the door after 0.5 seconds. And honestly, this kind of threw off the entire rhythm when you were playing NDC, and just felt a little weird. Freddy's intervals are also like impossible to remember. There's always so much stuff going on that you are bound to forget at least once.
5 points. Please deposit
Now, keeping with the theme of breakneck speed and no brain power in Hopeless Pursuit, Freddy has been altered so that he now leaves after 0.5 seconds with the door closed like everyone else. But he'll only leave if you see him at the door on the cameras, which I think is a pretty fair change. And honestly, I'd rather him be like this in NDC as well. Now, the last pair of door characters I think were purely made to make you rage as hard as possible. Balloon Boy and JJ are so stupid in HP. Now, as we already know, a Universal Deluxe change is that Helpy, BB, and JJ will always spawn on every single camera flip so you can farm more coins to make up for the increase in plushie prices. However, in HP, if you don't close the side vent the literal second you pull up the cameras, this is incredibly annoying, especially when you have to the second you pull up the cameras. This is incredibly annoying, especially when you have to coin farm so many coins in order to deal with the $60 plushies. And they honestly make coin farming deaths consistent the whole way through the HP experience. Next up, we have our distraction characters. And you might notice we got some pretty high rankings here. Let's talk about our tier 1s first. Old Man Consequences and Lolbit. What I think is most interesting about these tier 1s is that they're only ranked so high purely because of the game mode itself, not because they were actually buffed. I mean, OMC's lock is permanent, but you were pretty much dead if you locked your cams in NDC anyway. What makes OMC and Lolbit so difficult is that they take up your most crucial finger for the keyboard. To see what I mean, let's look at a basic layout of all the keys that you have to press constantly in Hopeless Pursuit. Now you'll notice that 5 separate keys for the right door, right vent, heater, Lolbit's E keybind, and OMC are all occupied by the left index finger. Most people would deal with OMC by spamming the C key until you catch his fish, but spamming the C key would mean neglecting everything else that your left index finger has to do. And in that time, it's very likely that someone that needs one of those keys can spawn and completely end your run. We'll get more into keyboard hell later in the strategy and my experience sections, but just know for now that distraction characters suck in Hopeless Pursuit. There are some other distraction characters, but honestly, they just mess up your screen for a second or two and don't do much else. Next up, we have our progression characters, and these guys haven't been changed very much. In my opinion, they are the easiest part of the night. Lefty is like the tiniest bit more aggressive, but because of the nature of Hopeless Pursuit, you'll naturally be using silent ventilation a lot more. Jacko Chica has been slightly buffed, now killing the second the office hits 90 degrees rather than quickly materializing. Normally this isn't a problem, but do be careful as she can very easily catch you off guard if you're not paying attention.
Deposit 5 coins. Please
Now, there is still one last category of animatronics that I haven't mentioned yet, because in Hopeless Pursuit, there is one group of characters that reigns far above the rest, and they are the Office characters.
deposit, please deposit.
Oh my god.
The Office characters in Hopeless Pursuit are far and away the hardest group of characters. And all of that is thanks to our inarguable top tier 1, Night Marionette. Bro, Night Marionette in HP is impossible. Like, bro, he actually makes me want to like... There's a reason that Night Marionette is not only important enough to be in the thumbnail, but also the giant Lovecraftian monster in all of the animation kits. If you need a quick refresher on his mechanic, if your cursor's on him for too long, he materializes and jump scares you. And as you would expect, he materializes really fast in Hopeless Pursuit compared to NDC, but he has another sneaky buff that you might not expect. And we actually saw this first in the Worst Luck series. You see, the way that Night Marionette works in vanilla UCN is through a form of randomness. He has 4 different positions that he randomly cycles through every second while he's invisible. Then, once he happens to randomly hit a position where your cursor currently is, he starts materializing. So, in theory, Worst Luck Night Marionette would just spawn directly on your cursor every time he has a chance to move. And guess what? In HP, that is exactly what he does. Not only does he materialize faster and instantly find your cursor, he still disappears faster like how he does in NDC. This gives him plenty of time to reappear wherever you move to, making him basically heat-seeking. The reason that this is such a big deal is that literally every clickable object in the office is in one of Night Marionette's positions. For example, let's look at the dreaded MeeBird cycle. Once we drop the cameras here, we immediately have so many things we need to do. If we get unlucky, we'll have to click 4 separate animatronics right away, and they are all on Night Marionette's leftmost spawn. Helpy, MeeBird, Bonnet, and the wet floor sign form a perfect column directly on Night Marionette's leftmost office spawn. So now, every single motion that you make in the office has to be a quick and accurate flick of the mouse. If you thought FNAC3 was a CSGO aim trainer, bro, I am telling you, hop on HP and play the 110 office cycle. Aside from the obvious king of Hopeless Pursuit, there are some other office character changes that are worth going over. Helpy's jump scare timer is a lot faster. Pursuit. There are some other office character Aside from the obvious king of Hopeless Pursuit, there are some other office character changes that are worth going over. Helpy's jump scare timer is a lot faster in HP. Usually, misclicking him once will result in you getting jump scared by him. In NDC, getting jump scared by Helpy would just slightly agitate Music Man, but on HP, Helpy will send Music Man straight to his last and most aggressive stage. Scrap Baby has been altered so that if you shock her when she isn't looking up at you, she steals 20% of your power. So, unless your name is Bulan25, it guarantees a power out death. Rockstar Freddy, like Rockstar Bonnie, is another permanent character, meaning he never stops asking for coins once he gets activated around the 45-second mark. So paying him will just reset his kill timer, not actually satisfy him. His pay button is also right in the center of a Night Marionette spawn and a mini arena spawn, and honestly, with all the visual distractions, I had a lot of difficulty trying to hit it. The last office character that I want to go over is one that you probably wouldn't expect to be a tier 1, but honestly, I'll argue that Phone Guy is one of the hardest characters in Hopeless Pursuit. Now, this is going to get a little bit into conspiracy theory territory because I haven't looked into the UCN Deluxe code at all, but I swear the Phone Guy spawns in Hopeless Pursuit are always really bad on purpose. Now, the only reason why I listed Phone Guy as an office character is because of this spawn right here. This is just evil, bro. You have to flick to hit the mute call button here because he spawns smack dab in the middle of the Night Marionette hitbox. But if you flick the tiniest bit too hard, you'll end up pulling up the cameras too early and messing everything up. But that isn't the only time he spawned in absurd locations. Here he spawns right on the mini arena's head, so he's really hard to see. Sometimes when you're winding the box, he'll spawn on the complete opposite side of the screen, and you'll have to waste precious seconds flicking your mouse over to that side. Now with this one, I am convinced it is planned. At around the 50-second mark, the new challenger icon will appear for one of the Zor characters, and Phone Guy will spawn behind it. You cannot tell me this isn't on purpose.
5 coins.
That's so... What?
Also, like, dude, watch this. I swear he literally sees my cursor. So, as you can see from all of these insane buffs, Hopeless Pursuit is absolutely crazy. There's a reason that whenever a new max mode is verified and everyone wonders how hard it is, the first thing everyone says is below HP. So with all of that, what kind of strategy can we even use to deal with all of this? The strategy for HP is similar to NDC in a lot of ways. It's pretty much the same cycle. However, like I mentioned earlier, Hopeless Pursuit is all about raw skill in favor of zero RNG or adaptation. So Hopeless Pursuit could essentially be scripted out. In the early days of HP, before it was verified, Pyrus, one of the contenders to verify it, developed a strategy that details exactly when to open the cameras to start camera cycles, drastically increasing the consistency of runs. These were known as Pyrus cycles, and this was the backbone for all Hopeless Pursuit strategies going forward. Essentially, you wanted to always open the cameras on the intervals of 11, 26, 41, and 56, though not every cycle is the same. To differentiate these cycles, I'm going to break them up into odd cycles and even cycles. 11 and 41 being the first and third in the hour, so they're odd, and 26 and 56 being the second and fourth in the hour, so they're the even cycles. Now, within the camera cycle itself, there were also a lot of optimizations necessary to keep up with the breakneck speed of the overall cycle. The first of which was how I wound the puppet. Normally, I was used to opening the cams to get Foxy, then clicking on cam 4 and winding the box from there. But you can actually select cam 4, then go straight to the duct system and wind from there. As long as you have cam 4 selected on the camera system, switching to any of the other systems will keep the music box button on screen. And this helps with a load of different animatronics. For one, we can look at and assess the duct system while we're winding. That way, we know exactly where to go in the ducts once we're done winding. While we deal with the ducts and vents, you can also listen for Chica for much longer, and get a better idea of whether or not the music needs to be changed. This also prevents any fast Phantom BB deaths, as Phantom BB isn't able to spawn on the duct or vent system. As you enter the vent system, you want to immediately slam the right vent snare as fast as possible. Withered Chica is guaranteed to be ready to attack on every 33-second interval, so you want to make sure that you catch her here. While you're moving your cursor to get to the right vent, find Mangle and close her off if need be. Now, when moving into the cameras, focus on the bottom left corner of the screen for Rockstar Bonnie's guitar. Remember that he's permanent, so if you miss the guitar on any cycle, you won't have enough time to recover and he will jump scare you. If you're on an even cycle, Freddy will be at the left door. I recommend closing the left door immediately as you get to his camera, as we don't want him desyncing from the overall cycle. Now, head up to Toy Freddy's camera and play his game. Do this as fast as possible, since he's usually on the brink of gaming over once you reach him. Now, head over to Funtime Foxy's camera and try to reset the ventilation. You can survive if you miss it here, but it will make the office cycle a lot harder to see. Also, make sure to wait on the camera for about half a second. Remember that Plushtrap here is permanent, so we're gonna have to get rid of him every single cycle. Plushtrap's time is cumulative, so if you watch him for a bit on one cycle, the time that you watched him will save. So at the end of every cycle, we're going to get half of his timer, and at the beginning of the next cycle, we're gonna finish it off. Now, when you drop the cameras, get ready for the entire reason this max mode is ranked so high, the office cycle. As I've said before, the office cycle is far and away the hardest part of Hopeless Pursuit, so I'm gonna try and break it down as slow as possible. Depending on whether or not you are on an even or odd cycle, you may have to click MeBird for Rockstar Foxy. Let's assume that this is the hardest office cycle possible, because if you can do this, you can do literally any other office cycle. In this case, you're on an even cycle, so we'll have to grab MeBird, and Bonnet happened to spawn while you were in the cameras. This creates what I'm going to call the chaotic combo. When you drop the cameras all in less than a second, you have to click Helpy, MeBird, Bonnet, and the wet floor sign, all while avoiding the Night Marionette spawn that overlaps all 4 of these items. While doing this with your mouse hand, you need to press 3 in order to turn on the heater to get rid of Nightmare Chica, as Nightmare Chica will always spawn on MeBird cycles. Then, after the heater has been on for about a second, press 2 to activate the silent ventilation. Now, once you've moved the wet floor sign, there are 2 general strategies you can use for mouse movement. I like to call them the circle and the wall. The more common of the 2 is the circle, and I've seen this used by most Hopeless Pursuit victors. You first want to deal with the chaotic combo on the left side, then use the flashlight for about a second for the frettles. Do this while you're on the left side in case Nightmare BB is sitting down. Now, move the wet floor sign to the right and follow it with your mouse. Then, move it back to the left, flash Nightmare BB if he's standing up, pay Rockstar Freddy, and select the topmost option for Rockstar Foxy to get your 5% power. Then, shock Scrap Baby if need be, turn on the power gen and fan with space and 1, then wait until the next Pyrus cycle time and open the cameras. You can kinda see how each item that you have to interact with forms a circle in the office, which is why it's called the circle. The wall is more so just going from left to right and clicking every single threat by changing your vertical position. Out of all of the HP victors, I've only really seen Almohadalus use this strategy for office cycles. I would often flip between this and the circle method, but ultimately I found the circle method to be more comfortable. If that sounds like a lot on its own, remember you're constantly being bombarded with door characters and distraction characters during all of this. Honestly, once you've done it so many times, it feels like you can almost stop time when you drop the cameras, just because your brain becomes so conditioned to recognize so many threats so quickly. Thankfully, that is the hardest part of the night, and as long as you know how to do that and camera cycles, you can beat Hopeless Pursuit. Though there are a few special cycles that I want to go over. The first is hour changes. The cam cycle at 56 seconds is generally the hardest cycle. Essentially, you're going to open the cameras and go to the music box like normal, but instead of going to the ducts, stay on the music box camera and wind the box up fully. Then, right before the hour changes, change to Funtime Foxy's camera and watch the showtime. Now we want to go into the ducks as fast as possible after the hour changes, since Happy Frog is practically going to be crawling out of the duck at this point. Now when you do this, don't stare at the timer and try to time it that way. You'll probably undershoot it. Instead, use Funtime Chica as a visual cue of when to switch. She appears every 10 seconds, so the moment you see her, click to change to the duck system and change the lure and duck around as fast as possible. Now run through the cameras as fast as you can, since Toy Freddy is going to game over in about 5 seconds. Now here's what an hour change cycle and office cycle looks like at full speed.
Deposit 5 coins. Deposit 5 coins. Deposit 5 coins. Thank you for depositing 5 coins. Please deposit.
The only other kind of special cycles are the plushie cycles. At 1 minute, 3:11, and 5:41, you're going to have to buy the 3 plushies. The only difference here is that you'll have to quickly glance in Cam 2 to see which plushie animatronic it is. Then, after you get Toy Freddy, click on Cam 7 and buy the plushie as fast as you can. If you haven't already, you should definitely memorize the locations of each plushie and prize corner so that you don't waste too much time trying to buy them. If you can survive that, you've learned pretty much all that you need to know for HP. But trust me, saying that and then actually playing it are 2 very different things. I hope so far that this video has been a funny one that you guys could laugh at. Unfortunately, the rest of this video won't be like that. I won't lie to you guys, Hopeless Pursuit was the worst experience I've ever had playing a video game. Everything people say about Hopeless Pursuit is 100% true. It is really that bad. For the rest of this video, I'm gonna catalog my HP experience like how I did with the FNAF Lock video, going day by day. However, in FNAF Lock, that challenge only took 6 days. Now, you might be thinking, only took 6 days? Dude, how long are you gonna spend on Hopeless Pursuit? Well, instead of days, we're gonna break up the grind into 4 to 5 day sections. I started HP all the way back in mid-December, but at this point I was more so just playing it in the background and focusing on other things. I truly experienced it for the first time on stream after I beat Deluxe NDC, and honestly, after I played it for the first time, I thought, wow, this sucks. I never want to play this ever again. From that point onward, I would just attempt it on and off. And the first wall that I had to break was getting used to the drastically increased amount of keyboard inputs required right off the bat. Around this time, this was what an average HP run looked like. Coin farming had become so much harder compared to NDC Deluxe, and honestly, it was probably the most demotivating part of the entire night. I'd estimate that around this time, roughly 1 in 10 runs would even get to the first camera cycle and make it out of coin farming. And these coin farming deaths really never stop. Throughout the entire time I spent grinding this challenge, at best, 2 out of 3 runs were still dying at the very beginning of the night. Now, the reason why I found coin farming so challenging has to do with my muscle and keyboard memory. This is gonna become a reoccurring theme in this video, but Fredbear and especially Nightmare really mess with my keyboard hand. You see, this is how I would normally coin farm. I pull up the cameras and place my left index finger on the F key for the right vent in order to close it on BB and JJ. Once I pressed F, I would then keep my finger on the F key until I had to reopen the vent. It may look like characters just hit the doors the moment you shut them in UCN from a casual perspective, but in reality, characters actually take 0.5 seconds to leave. They also only have 2 timers, a kill timer and a leave timer. So if you happen to have a door closed and don't fill up the 0.5 second leave timer before the kill timer runs out, the animatronic will just phase through the door and jump scare you anyway. So UCN isn't like literally every other game where they either leave on a movement opportunity or just instantly bonk when the door is shut. So my coin farming muscle either leave on a movement opportunity or just instantly bonk when the door is shut. So my coin farming muscle memory always told me to keep my finger on the F key in order to reopen the vent 0.5 seconds later. So what happens when in those 0.5 seconds, a character that requires my left index finger spawns? Well, at this point in the grind, my brain would just shit itself and I would die. Hopeless Pursuit has a ton of combos like this with your keyboard. Anytime you have to use the flashlight and Fredbear or Ballora on the left shows up, your ring finger is stuck between the Z and A keys. Anytime that you have to close the front vent and use the silent ventilation, your middle finger is stuck between the W and 2 keys. And if literally any of these things happen, your index finger is stuck between the 3, E, D, C, and F keys. This is why characters like OMC and Lolbit are now ranked as some of the hardest characters in the game, despite never receiving any direct buffs. On the rare runs that did get past coin farming, I noticed an immediate problem around the 30-second mark, and that was the L-chip and Afton combo. Even though I had regone volume to Q and E, I still have my L-chip add skip bind as an enter like in the default game. I considered my movement to the enter key on my keyboard pretty fast, but I guess it wasn't fast enough, as whenever a door character spawned right as an ad appeared, I would usually fall apart, and it's pretty easy to see why. I have a full-size keyboard, so whenever I had to move my hand back from the enter key all the way to W, A, S, and D, it was pretty common for me to misplace my hand and hit the wrong key. And when that door character is someone like Afton, who only gives about 1.1 seconds to react, missing my keyboard hand would usually result in death. So at this point, I finally decided to bite the bullet and rebind L-chip's add skip to left shift. Now I had a keyboard configuration that no matter what animatronic appeared, my hand would never leave the left side of the keyboard, and I had access to all crucial keys at all times. Though it's obviously much better ergonomically to have left shift as your L-chip key, man, it was really hard to break that muscle memory for enter. I had played so much vanilla UCN and up to this point used enter in deluxe, so I was still very used to enter. And every time I saw that ad flash, I had to restrain my arm from going all the way over to the enter key. After about 1.5 days, I had finally managed to get comfortable with my new keybinds through sheer brute force. And I even worked my way up to a 1 AM PB. Though getting a 1 AM personal best was kind of misleading. For one, the 12 AM hour is significantly easier than every other hour in both chem cycles and office cycles. For the first 2 cycles, Rockstar Bonnie usually isn't even present, and during office cycles, we don't even get Rockstar Freddy and Diddy Meals aren't even here yet. And just to get to 1 AM, it had taken me almost 4 days, and honestly, I thought at this point, I should just do this challenge and video in the background. I'll do some easier challenges for some filler, and slowly but surely work my way up second by second HP. But it was then that a real-life event would change how I thought about pretty much everything. One of my most frequently asked questions on this channel is how I got my name and avatar. For one, I'm not a furry. Here's a chart of how I got to my current profile picture. It spawned off of the Doge meme, but that's not the point here. I want to talk about how I got the name The Bones 5. When I was back in high school, I wanted to enter in a competitive Super Smash Bros. Ultimate tournament, and I needed a tag to go by. I wanted something that was cool, simple, and unique, since my previous tag was literally just my real name with some numbers at the end. And while that works for some people, I thought about my loved ones, people that are special to me, and that's when it hit me. My dog's name is Bones, so I'll be The Bones. I needed a number to make it stick, so I chose 5, the number of friends in my longest standing friend group. And that was that. Everyone loved my gamer tag, and a lot of people liked it so much that Bones became my real life nickname. So why am I telling you guys this now? It seems kind of out of place. Well, in my videos, I like to make them more than just gaming challenge videos. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, you know that I like to get pretty personal with you guys and talk about the mental and physical challenges that whatever I'm doing gave me, not just playing the game. But I truly wasn't and never could be ready for what was about to happen. On December 23rd of 2024, Bones passed away.
Hey guys, for those who don't know why I'm sitting outside instead of my room, when I cover a bit heavier topics, I like to go here. This is the Tree of Life, if you haven't seen it in the FNAF walk video already. I like to go here so I'm not just like sitting in my room recording. I feel like it's a little dull sometimes. I don't have the motorcycle here like last time because it's too cold to even start it, much less ride it. So we're just sitting on the ground. It's better than the basement. Bones, more than anything, he was a lover. Like, you could say he'd be a really bad security dog because he just loved everyone. He didn't care who you were, where you came from, what you smelled like. No matter who you were, the second you entered the house, he'd be all over you. I spent my entire like conscious life with Bones. We got him when I was like 4 years old, and I wasn't really, sentient before then. Throughout like my entire life, Bones was always there for me, and he was part of like our entire family. My mom, she'd keep him company when I was at school, my dad was at work. He'd watch YouTube with my dad when we were about to go to sleep, and he helped me grow up. He was there through every stage of my life, truly. And when Bones passed, I felt a kind of pain that I really have never felt before. I've never lost anyone close to me before, ever, actually. And I had this, like, almost hollow feeling that I wasn't used to ever feeling before. Bones, he went out with dignity. Like, we had to put him down because he had lost his sight, and he had already lost his hearing and was losing his smell. But his physical body could have gone on for probably a few more years. And I was angry because I felt like he was ripped away from us. If his eyes didn't go, if his senses didn't go, he'd still be here. I felt like cheated that he had gone in the way that he did. And after that happened, I lost motivation for pretty much like everything in my life. It was rough. But deep down, I still had this one burning desire. I try to be as transparent as I can with you guys in these videos. I think it makes them a lot better. And if I'm gonna be completely honest, the real reason that I made this video, or wanted to make this video, was kind of selfish. Since I've started YouTube, I've always seen a ton of comments in my sections and other people's comment sections comparing me to the other big FNAF challenge YouTubers. Like, who's better, who's more insane, who does the crazier challenges, you know? And I wanted this video to be inarguable evidence that I was like the best challenge YouTuber. Like I do the hardest challenges, right? But after Bones passed away, all this like internet, social media stuff, comparing about who's better at what, like none of it mattered at all. It all seemed so utterly meaningless, right? I didn't care if it was me or Chicken Ninja or Spiff or whoever the comments were talking about. No, I was gonna beat this challenge for an entirely different reason. I wanted to honor my friends, my brother, the entire reason this channel exists, my childhood best friend, right? And I wasn't gonna do that through some lame, is it possible to beat this without this, you know, just like every other video. I wanted to do something really, really important and meaningful. And something that really meant something to me and a lot of other people, you know? And this is when I decided I am going to literally put everything I have and I am going to beat Hopeless Pursuit so I can immortalize Bones' name in the FNAF community forever. It's not a question anymore.
This challenge had originally started as a background project, one of pride. I wanted to prove that I was the best FNAF challenge YouTuber in terms of skill. But now, that all felt so utterly meaningless. But even though my original goal was gone, my motivation ran deeper than anything I had ever done before. To those of you who wanted to see the true gauntlet or any other video, I'm sorry. In order for me to feel like I had honored Bones properly, it had to be the hardest challenge that I was capable of doing. I had to beat Hopeless Pursuit here and now, not for a selfish and prideful reason, but for Bones. Previously, I had been playing Hopeless Pursuit on and off. But this was the day that I swore I was going to dedicate everything that I had to completing Hopeless Pursuit. From this day forward until I completed HP, I would play for every single day for as long as possible. If you don't know from previous videos, I'm currently a full-time college student studying computer science, but I still had about half of my winter break left over, meaning that I could play significantly more per day than if I was at school. If there was one thing that I did have, it was time. My break ended on January 19th, so I had 28 days to complete Hopeless Pursuit. Now starting on December 23rd, my journey truly began. For almost this entire section in these first few days, you'll notice that my usual face cam is now a hand cam instead. And I'll be completely honest with you guys, the days after Brandon's passing, I would just break down sometimes. And I didn't really want to see that looking back on these recordings. The face cam would return later, just when I was a bit more emotionally stable. The day of Bones' passing, I had a much different mental state than usual. Usually, I tend to get very annoyed and angry with these kinds of games pretty quickly. But after such a life-altering event, it was so hard to get angry at petty Hopeless Pursuit deaths, which was kind of the inspiration for the new Bones redesign for this video. When something like this happens, you can't really feel anything else properly for a while. Almost immediately, I had jumped up from my personal best around 1 AM flat to a 142. Unfortunately, I didn't record a lot of these super early personal bests because I knew that I wasn't gonna fluke the entire night. But from some of the footage history, I can tell that these personal bests were accurate. Christmas Eve and Christmas Day came and went. Both days I spent playing HP with no progress, but this was to be expected. 1 AM in Hopeless Pursuit is known as one of the biggest walls in max modes, as 12 AM is kind of a tutorial hour, with some key components missing from camp and office cycles. But once you hit 1 AM and get past it, it's just repeating that hour for the rest of the night. Even though I did have a 149 PB, it's worth noting that this PB wasn't exactly perfect. You see, there are 3 key metrics that you always need to keep up throughout any Hopeless Pursuit run. These are your power, coins, and cycle time. Power is the most obvious. If you leave a door closed for too long, which trust me is very easy to do, or miss a Meebird on any of the office cycles, you probably won't have enough power to finish the night. We'll talk more about coins later on, but right now I wasn't really too concerned with them as plushies didn't really matter at this point. The first plushie animatronic would kill at 2 AM if I didn't buy their plushie, and I hadn't even gotten there yet. However, the most determining factor in getting a new personal best is your cycle time. Remember that from earlier, Pyrus cycles kinda script out when you should do cam and office cycles in HP. So if you're too slow on a cam or office cycle, you're going to bleed a few seconds and fall off cycle. When this happens, there are a few characters that can punish you for it. Mainly Toy Freddy, the ducked characters, and Widow Chica and Mangle in the vents. As I played more and more, I began to notice a pattern in my runs. The wall was specifically at the 56 to 111 cycle, the first hour transition. I would almost never get past this specific cycle in the run. And out of the first 4 days of attempts, I only made it there on power pace and without bleeding any cycle time once. I was so panicked once it happened that I ended up messing up the next cycle to a mistake with Phantom Mangle. The reason that this cycle was so problematic was because it was an extremely tight cam cycle, followed by the first proper office cycle of the night. The hardest office cycle in the 12 AM hour is around 35 seconds, as it's the first time that we have to click Meebird and Rockstar Foxy, while also using the heater to deal with Nightmare Chica. But here, we don't have the mini arenas, Bonnet, or Rockstar Freddy active, so there's significantly less to deal with. Now, at 106, we drop the cameras to a full office cycle that will require the circle or wall methods we talked about earlier. But trying to learn these methods on the fly was extremely difficult. Usually, I just ended up going in some random order and trying to click everything on screen, which most of the time resulted in a Nightmarionette death. And if I didn't, I would bleed tons of time and wouldn't open the cameras anywhere near the 11-second mark. Mentally, this was a huge struggle, because it truly felt like every run that I got to this cycle was just doomed instantly. There was no way to practice for this specific cycle without getting a run that makes it here. And remember, the camera cycle before it is extremely precise. Usually, you're within 1 to 2 seconds of a Toy Freddy game over. At one point, I did consider trying to make some sort of practice mod, like how PXH Ghost did all the way back when I beat Dragon Got All challenges for the first time, but that felt kind of cheap. If all of the Hopeless Pursuit victors before me did it in this way, then I was gonna learn this way too. So I kept trying and trying with the mentality that if I could just get through this one cycle, I could get through the night. As December 26th passed, I started to realize something. If I wanted to practice the 105 office cycle more, I needed to get as many runs there as possible, even if it meant not having good coins or good power when I got there. I could worry about coins and power later. For now, I just needed better speed and aim to survive. So, I decided to not coin farm nearly as hard at the beginning of the night, as coin farming still made up most of my deaths. This drastically boosted the number of runs that were getting to the cycle of death, and I even had a few runs past it, albeit while bleeding a lot of cycle time. Finally, on day 6, I managed to get a flat 2 AM personal best. Unfortunately, this was off recording, so I can't show you guys, but from memory, I died because I didn't buy the plushie, since I wasn't really focused on getting past 2 AM, just getting to it. So in 6 days, we've managed to march from 142 to 2 minutes. If anything, that should tell you how much harder HP is than anything I've done before. For reference, I was already done with FNAF Lock once I had hit day 6.
It has been 6 days!
And I was complete garbage at FNAF back then relative to how I am now. Relatively speaking, getting to 2 AM on Hopeless Pursuit with good power pace was already harder than anything that I had ever done in FNAF by a mile. So yes, that does mean just getting 2 AM on Hopeless Pursuit is harder than Deluxe NDC, and it's not close. So now, there was nothing left to do but push forward. For the next few days, progress was still extremely slow. Every time that I would get a new personal best, it would only be a small march forward by a few seconds. And honestly, this was pretty discouraging. If I was progressing at a rate of 8 seconds per day on a good day, there was no way that I was going to beat HP by the 19th. I still wasn't very consistent with the 105 office cycle, but there were some runs that would occasionally get past it. But as I was having a conversation with my mom at dinner about the grind, she brought up a good point. Also, she comments on all my videos, "Love you, Mom, we're doing this for Bones." She said that even though I hadn't been improving my main personal best that much, my consistency was still getting better day by day. Slowly but surely, I had more and more runs that were creeping into the 130 to 140 range. The new year came and went, and I had only progressed about 8 seconds overall. But thankfully, my mental state had gotten a bit better since Bones' passing. Before, I had had a lot of trouble sleeping just thinking about him, and with how much that I was playing per day, I'm sure that I was getting fatigued due to a lack of sleep. It was looking pretty bad deadline-wise, until January 2nd. I don't know what was different about this day, but when I started up runs, it was like I was playing an entirely different game. I don't know if it was good luck from Bones or what, but in one day, I managed to jump my PB by nearly a full minute. And for the first time, I finally felt a bit of relief in the speed of my progress. It had taken me 11 days to get to 303, meaning that if I kept this pace, I should be able to easily get HP done by the 19th. So now that I had a personal best that was halfway through the night, I was pretty optimistic and I continued my grind. A reoccurring concept in almost all forms of media is the yin and yang, the idea of a balance between light and dark. They say that the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. Well, that 303 run must have been a really bright light because man, I've never had a bigger wall than 3 minutes and 3 seconds on Hopeless Pursuit. When I first got my 303 personal best, I finally felt like I had made some decent progress for once. If I could start getting consistent 3 AMs, the rest of the night shouldn't be that bad. But I think I had mentally tricked myself into thinking this 303 was a lot better than it actually was. You see, it's one thing to get a 303. It's an entirely different thing to get a 303 that's on cycle, on power pace, and on coin pace. Essentially, there's a very big gap between a 303 that could potentially win the night and a 303 where you barely crawled your way to 3 AM. And in this run, I had horrible power, horrible coins, and I was nearly 5 seconds off cycle. I didn't know this at the time, but that 303 personal best would haunt me for the next 6 days. Now that I knew I was capable of surviving this long into the night, I wanted to ensure that the next time I got to 3 AM, I could keep going as far as possible, which means having good coins, good power, and good cycle time. Now, in the strategy portion, I never really mentioned these, because power and cycle time are both pretty intuitive. To have good power, just make sure you don't miss any me birds and don't forget any closed doors. It sounds easy enough, but oftentimes I would look at the usage bar while in the cams and notice, hey, that's not what the power gen fanning cams look like. Then I'd end up closing and opening every single door to find which one was shut and lose like half my power doing it. It's just one of those keyboard torture things that you have to adjust to. Cycle time is pretty self-explanatory, you just have to be fast. Interestingly though, out of these 3 metrics, the hardest isn't cycle time or power. The hardest is actually coins. In base NDC, you barely even notice coins as a threat. You just farm like 20 at the beginning, then naturally you'll earn enough throughout the night that you'll always be able to afford plushies. However, in Hopeless Pursuit, coins are a lot more strict. Real quick, let's talk about how absurdly rich you need to be in Hopeless Pursuit. So all 3 plushies cost 60 Faz coins each for a total of 180 coins. And Rockstar Freddy's greedy ass literally never stops asking for coins. So we're paying him 4 times per hour starting at 1 AM. 4 times 5 times 5 coins. So we're paying him 4 times per hour starting at 1 AM. 4 times 5 times 5 is 100. So we need to get 280 coins total throughout the entire night to win. Remember that plushies now cost 60 gold coins to buy, and your coins are capped at 70. You'd think that the increased frequency of door characters would make up for this, since every time a door character hits a door, you're awarded a coin. But there's a strange quirk with both Deluxe and Vanilla UCN. Coins are only awarded when you block door characters separately. For example, let's say Nightmare spawns at the right door and Ballora spawns with him. When you shut the door, you'll hear 2 bonks right away, or 1 loud bonk indicating that they both left, but you'll only be awarded with 1 coin. The reason that this happens is because the sound file of the bonk ending is actually what gives you your coin. So when a second sound cue interrupts that first sound cue, you'll only get 1 coin for both sound cues. This isn't really a problem in Vanilla UCN or normal Deluxe, because door characters don't spawn that often. But in Hopeless Pursuit, with characters like Nightmare that can spawn every 2 seconds, there's bound to be some door overlaps. Because of stuff like this, you have to farm a ton more coins at the beginning of the night to compensate. By 13 seconds, you want to have about 24 to 27 coins. Then, after you finish the first mini cam cycle, you want to keep farming so that you have 40 coins by 26 seconds. This adds a ton more difficulty to the beginning of the night, but the pain with coins doesn't end there. If you've played through the first hour of the night correctly, you should be at about 64 to 67 Faz coins on the hour change. If you've done everything right, during the next cam cycle, you're going to hit the coin cap of 70 coins. Which means that on top of being the tightest camera and office cycle on the hour change, we now have to buy a plushie in this cycle. So we'll now have to spend roughly an extra 3/4 of a second in the cameras, which means the super ultra evil office cycle at 105 is now even stricter. In earlier runs, I would usually just buy the plushie on the 111 camera cycle, since that camera cycle gives you a lot more time than the hour change one. But if you're actually intent on beating the full night, buying the plushie here would mean that you wouldn't have enough coins at 5 AM for the last plushie, and you could suffer the dreaded 559 death. And this has actually happened. Sero, the 3rd Hopeless Pursuit victor, ended up not having enough coins for the 5 AM plushie and died at 559. Even though I didn't expect to get that far from 3 AM, I wasn't going to take any chances, so I made sure to always buy this plushie on the first cycle. I also strangely started to have a lot more trouble with Chica, specifically on the 144 interval.
There's no way. There's no way.
This would usually be a music change interval if Chica wasn't desynced, but this interval managed to match up perfectly with the part of the Pots and Pans audio file that was completely silent. So you either had to listen for a really long time or just take the gamble. This made the 1 AM hour change and the 144 my biggest choke points in the night. And when I got back to attempts on the 3rd of January, it was like the wall had reformed and I just couldn't get past 1 AM anymore. I thought that eventually this would pass. If I kept playing, I'd eventually get consistent with it. So, January 4th went by, then the 5th. marking 2 weeks straight that I had been playing HP every single day. And now it was really starting to wear on me. Every single day I woke up knowing that I had to play Hopeless Pursuit for pretty much the entire day. Otherwise, I felt like I wasn't trying my hardest to honor Bones' memory. It was at this point that I also started to feel some physical injuries as well. I began to develop blisters on my mouse hand, on my ring, and pinky from gripping the mouse. And my shoulders started to get tired faster from holding out my hands on the mouse and keyboard. At this point, I started to get really anxious that I wasn't going to make the deadline anymore. Beating HP by January 19th sure sounded doable when I had first gotten the 303, but now that 4 whole days had passed with no progress, I wasn't so sure. I really needed this done by the deadline to have any hopes of getting the video out in a realistic time span. So I began to alter my daily routine in order to give myself more time to play HP. I would only eat 2 meals a day, and I began working out for 1 hour every day rather than 3 hours 3 times a week. That way I could at least have some form of break in between gameplay. And now I was genuinely wondering, was this the right choice? I'm gonna let you guys in on some insider information for being a gaming challenge YouTuber. If you want to get as many views as possible, you have to find a challenge that is really easy to do, but sounds really hard. If you want proof of this, look no further than my own channel. My most popular video is beating FNAF 4 without using the doors, despite this being the easiest FNAF challenge that I have ever done. All of the "is it possible to beat this without this" videos are like this. And I was kinda shaken up after realizing that I wasn't gonna hit my proper upload deadline. By the 2-week mark on any normal video, I would have already beaten the challenge and had the script fully complete. But here, all I had was a 3 AM at best with no signs of progression. I was thinking back to the earlier phases of my channel, the FNAF log days, where Toy Bonnie was the hardest enemy on this channel. And now it was just this. I guess you could say this had shown how far I had come. FNAF Lock was literally nothing now in terms of skill. But I don't know, in a strange way, I kind of missed it. Ultimately though, I had to remember that I wasn't doing this for a successful video. Sure, it would be nice if the video did well. I really wanted this video to be the one that defines my channel from here on out, so liking, commenting, or subscribing would mean the world to me. But in the end, this video was to honor Bones, and it had to be special. With that mentality, I kept pushing on, trying to scale this impossibly tall personal best wall. I didn't realize at the time, but the reason that I was stuck was buying the plushie at the 056 cycle. And I'm sure my consistency had been getting better, but my brain was still so focused on that HP best time number that stared me in the face every time I wanted to start another game. On January 7th, 16 days in, I still hadn't scaled the wall, but I had hope as I was finally getting some improvement in my average run. Having a high personal best is one thing, because that's just one run out of many, but getting a higher average run means that a personal best is right around the corner. And on January 8th, 17 days into my HP streak, this happened.
Oh, the wall has been broken. Holy f***. By 3 seconds, the wall has been broken.
For 6 days, I fought tooth and nail, playing every day with all I had for 3 seconds. And though it may seem like a small step, this was huge. My average run past coin farming was now a late 1 AM to early 2 AM. Now I had so many more chances to get up to that 3 AM. And this wasn't just another fluke. This was proof that I could consistently reach 3 AM. I managed to once again reach 3 AM with a 312 on that same day.
Wow. On cycle 2.
Things might not have been looking good deadline-wise, but at least I finally had a fighting chance to actually beat the mode. After finally breaking the 303 wall, I was in good spirits, and the next day, I proved it, jumping all the way from 312 to 348 with another fluke. Once again, this was another big jump in personal bests, but this time I knew what to expect. I knew that for the next day or two, I probably wasn't going to get any personal bests as I had to work my way back up from the fluke that I had just gotten. So I kept grinding away, getting more and more runs into that mid 2 to low 3 a.m. range. January 10th and 11th passed with no progress, which meant that I probably wasn't going to hit the deadline. And I was starting to realize that the stress of beating HP by January 19th was just going to make me play worse. At the pace I was at, I wasn't going to make it by then. And I think I just had to accept that. And then everything changed.
Crap. Uh-oh.
442, a fluke by nearly a full in-game hour. This was getting scary. Not only did I have really good power up until the very end, I had bought both the first and second plushie at the correct times, and I had good coin pace. Even with insane nerves, I had only bled about a second in cycle time. And ultimately, I died to a mistake, not to getting checked by one of the cycle characters. This run had a very real possibility of beating the night. You have to understand that at this point, I couldn't even imagine actually beating the night. It's hard to quantify in a video like this how much time that I had spent at this point. This was day 23 of playing Hopeless Pursuit every single day in a row. And remember, the majority of runs were still just dying at coin farming over and over again. And every day I had to spend about 20 minutes warming up just to get absolutely nowhere. But this was a shock. The fact that I was legitimately in range of beating the night, the fact that I could actually do this, I genuinely couldn't believe it. I could do this for bones. So you're probably wondering, these past two personal bests that I've gotten were followed by massive walls. Would this one be the same? Would I have to wait a whole nother week and fight for a few more seconds? January 16th, day 25. The Bones 5 has reached 5 a.m. on Hopeless Pursuit. That 442 wasn't a fluke. Just 2 days later, I had broken the 5 a.m. barrier for the first time. On any other FNAF challenge, this would be a soul-crushing failure, but on Hopeless Pursuit, this was a massive step forward. And now, in a matter of days, that deadline was looking reasonable. That 5 a.m. run had good power and good coins. I only ended up losing because of poor cycle time and a mistake with Phantom Mangle. I had barely missed the camera button to despawn her, and she had pulled down my camera monitor. Panicked, I tried to see what I had to do in the office, and I didn't notice Scrap Baby looking up at me. At this point, we were on day 25, January 16th. I had 3 days left to beat the night before I had to go back to college. I knew that going back to college, adjusting to a new setup, and beating it there would delay this video more than it already had been. But this personal best may have also led to my greatest mental downfall. When I was still stuck on the walls of 303 and 348, I had come to terms with the fact that I probably wasn't going to be able to beat the night on time, and that I would have to beat it at college. But now it was do or die. I needed to beat it here. And that activated one of Hopeless Pursuit's biggest strengths, nerves. I haven't really talked about nerves up until this point, but for every single personal best I would get on HP, I would get extremely nervous. This usually resulted in a bit of brain fog when dealing with keyboard-heavy characters, and a ton of shakes on my mouse hand. which obviously didn't help with aiming. Personal best nerves are one thing, but 5 AM nerves are an entirely different beast. I would say that I built up pretty good nerve control with how many challenges I've done. Cuphead No Hit and Dark Souls No Death SL1 both had difficult final bosses at the end of hour, or even multi-hour long runs in the case of Dark Souls. I had beaten all of the FNAC 3 max modes, which are known for testing my nerves and aim, and I had done long-term FNAF challenges like the Gauntlet, FNAF Lock, and the 6-hour real-time challenge, all of which give you crazy nerves. But Hopeless Pursuit nerves are different. And I think the game knows how nervous you're going to be. You see, the game pulls a very clever trick on you once you reach 5 AM. If you remember earlier when we were talking about the Duck's events for the first time, you'll see that every character has been given a new and distinct icon to make it easier to see who's who. Well, once 5 AM hits, the icons in the Duck's events will revert back to their original vanilla forms, along with the retextured Golden Freddy. If you take away nerves, this doesn't affect your gameplay at all. Remember, the ducts and HP are just an aim test. You just change the lure around and you don't really have to think about it at all. And the vent icons are still very distinct. But what this change does is that it lets you know it is 5 AM and you can't ignore it. You can't just imagine it's an earlier hour. And wow, it does its job well. I feel like now is also a good time to mention, my opinions on difficult characters had switched drastically now that I'd gotten so much better at HP. If we look at the list of tier 1s that I had previously made, you'd see that I put a lot of weight on aim-based characters. In fact, the entire top 4 were all aim-based. But now, I felt like that had changed. Night Marionette and Office Cycles as a whole weren't really that difficult for me aim-wise, since I had now fully mastered the circle method. But keyboard characters were an entirely different story. Door characters, OMC, and Lolbit were all giving me a lot of trouble, especially in the later hours where I was known to choke. Let's take an example of an office cycle in this clip here. This isn't particularly far into the night, but it's a good example. Now, whenever I would play HP, I'd always have a small internal cue in the back of my brain telling me which characters I had to prioritize and deal with first. In this specific instance, characters like OMC and especially Lolbit overloaded my queue, and I kind of forgot about Nightmare until the very end. Then I wasn't fast enough to get rid of Lolbit and OMC to deal with Nightmare. And nerves really only amplify this. If I could control my nerves, Hopeless Pursuit was in reach. I ended up getting that 503 pretty late in the day on the 16th, so I just decided to prepare for tomorrow as the day that I should beat it instead of attempting more runs later into the night. Generally, the late morning to early afternoon were the best hours for playtime, most likely because I was already warmed up and not quite fatigued yet from multiple hours of playing throughout the day. Earlier during the 303 wall section, I had mentioned how I started to develop blisters on my hands from playing so much. Usually, these blisters would fade as I slept, then when I woke up, my hands would be healed enough to play for the first few hours of the day, then the wounds would start to irritate again. Realistically, this probably wasn't a good approach. Just taking one day off could have made a world of a difference, but I was so set on the mindset of if I take a day off, I am not honoring bones, and then I just couldn't. So after I had my warm-ups for the day, I started my runs. At this point, it was the 17th of January, and I had put a lot of pressure on myself to beat Hopeless Pursuit on this specific day. Every day of my winter break, I had spent either editing the previous video, then playing Hopeless Pursuit every single day. If I could beat HP today, I'd at least have 2 days where I could finally take a break. And slowly but surely, it was looking that way. I had bought the first plushie on time with 10 coins left over, the best possible scenario. I completed the cycle of death without much struggle, losing no cycle time. I was able to hear the 144 Chica and got past that. Then down went 2 AM and then 3 AM. The moment I bought the second plushie, nerves began to kick on, but I kept playing. I passed 4 AM on cycle, and with good power. In fact, I wasn't just on power